getting the session started. It's 5 minutes after. And I keep admitting.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get started, Elena.
Cool. Angela, I'm handing over to you, or do you want me to say something?
Yeah, go ahead and introduce the session and then we'll get going.
Okay, cool. So hi everyone, and welcome to this session. Angela and I have done other sessions before. One was focused on interviewing skills. The other one was focused on how to get your CV/resume industry ready. But I think what a lot of PhDs struggle is a step beforehand to really understand, okay, and when I say PhDs, I mean everyone with a PhD degree, PhDs, postdocs, and after, is really to understand how and where can their skills fit within industry. I mean, there are tons of roles out there, and it's really, really, I would say almost a bit overwhelming where to start and how to start. And Angela will walk Cameron through how he can think, where his skill set would fit. Cameron has filled in a workbook, so Angela will introduce all of this, but it will just be an example of how we usually coach our PhDs through the process of understanding where they would fit based on their skills. And we always consider transferable skills, which I think is also something we want to emphasize in this session. So really look beyond the very small niche where you worked before and think about how can these skills fit in other areas too. Yeah, and with this, I just want to say it's really nice to see so many of you here, and I hope you're going to enjoy this session. There will be a recording, and you will get an email from me after this session with an access to the recording, so you can rewatch it. And yeah, I think that's from my end.
Awesome. One of the first things that we always do in our coaching programs at Alma Me is really kind of help people understand where they fit within the workforce. A lot of times, because PhDs coming through academia really have kind of a very niche focus, it can be hard to expand out and really understand where else you could possibly fit, because in industry, like skills and roles and all of those things tend to be a little bit more broader, a little less specialized in certain areas. And a lot of times there's shared transferable skills across different jobs and job families. So before we get started, I want to thank Cameron, who has kindly volunteered to kind of be our coaching subject for the day. And so what we'll start off, I'm just going to run through and do a live coaching session with Cameron, so you all can get a sense of the types of questions and interrogation you might be wanting to ask yourselves as you launch off into this journey. So Cameron, we can go ahead and get started. I'm going to pin you up here so I can see you, because you're really tiny and my glasses are not that good. Okay. So, Cameron, I just kind of wanted to start a little bit. I took a look through your career planning workbook. But maybe if you could start off by just telling me a little bit about your background. I like to hear it kind of from your own perspective, where you're focused, what your career objectives are, those types of things.
Yeah, so I'm a fifth-year PhD candidate in nutrition sciences, but mostly I'm trained as a molecular biologist at the bench. I've been studying how iron is used in the brain. Oh, that's my background. Really, I'm kind of stuck because I feel like I've found myself in this pickle that I think maybe other people can relate to, of like for a long time just saying like, oh, well, I'm gonna get an industry job, and then like now I'm at the end of my degree and I need to figure out what kind of industry job to get. Um, which I've realized there's a lot more than I thought there were, like specific categories. But I know I don't want to be at the bench, so I think that narrows things down a decent bit. And yeah.
Okay. So, let me ask you this. In your day-to-day, whether it's at home or during your PhD, what are the types of things that you're drawn to doing? Like, what are the types of things where you're like, oh, that gives me so much energy whenever I do it? And if you did it all day, you would just like leave the end of the day like full of energy.
Yeah. Um, I like planning and I like managing people, and working with others more than I like the other aspects of my job. And I think I have more experience than some of my peers, like managing undergrad research projects. So, I guess all day, if I could just be planning, going to meetings and interacting with people, I'd be happy.
Yeah, as a
Yeah.
fellow organizer, I absolutely love that. It just like my little OCD heart, if I could just sit and like organize
Uh-huh.
stuff all day. Granted, my organization method is like unique to me, and when other people see it, they don't always understand it, but I get the need to,
Yeah.
the desire to want to organize. Um, so tell me what kind of draws you to that work? What is so interesting or engaging about that type of work for you?
hmm Good question. I think I just like being able to break things down into little parts and feel a sense of achievement when I accomplish those goals. But also I like helping other people kind of plan their own uh projects and experiences. Yeah, I mean, it's been rewarding for me because I've worked with mostly undergrads, so like they're usually juniors and seniors, and I can see them kind of like come into the lab and they don't even know how to pipette, and then when they leave, they like do their undergrad thesis and they're confident and they're going off to medical school, and I think that's what part of what's motivated me to enjoy that aspect of my job now. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're an enabler. Like you like to enable people.
Yeah.
What do you find most rewarding about that?
Um, I think that I just like being able to interact with others and understand their needs and like how I can help specific people, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So how I kind of got into that, because I have a background in project management. That's one of the things I do is I help companies stand up project management teams.
mhm,
And it sounds like that's kind of the arena that you're in. There's a few different flavors of it. But part of the reason I think I got into it, well, there's kind of two big reasons. One is I was always the nerdy kid who loved playing strategy games, and I love kind of like
mhm,
seeing all the moving parts and figuring out how to get them all to work together. But I also always kind of felt like the underdog because I didn't necessarily come from a background where I had all of the resources that other people had. My parents were very blue collar. I was going into white collar jobs, those types of things. And so I always kind of felt like an underdog. And so whenever I see somebody struggling, like I just want to unlock it. Like it's like I just want to help, figure it out and kind of like give them that leg up. Um, so when you think about like your origin story, like where does that kind of need or desire to help people or to engage people or to do this type of work, where does it kind of originate for you?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is that I kind of stumbled into where I am now
Hmm.
almost by accident, and I feel like I got really lucky to end up somewhere where like I did find something that I enjoy doing and like working with people that I like. But I feel like I didn't always have mentors who could give me advice on how I got here. So I was just like kind of at the end of undergrad, I was like, well, what do I like doing? Well, I kind of did some research and I like that, so I'll do a PhD. And then I got to the end of my PhD and now I see like other people who are like master students or undergrad students and they're like, well, maybe I want to do research. And I'm like, oh, well, you can do this, this, and this. And before you do it, you should figure out what you want to do so you don't just end up somewhere that you're not going to like. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
didn't always have mentors, and I think was mostly my fault for not looking for any. But I think that's part of what motivates me to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it was a little bit about it wasn't that I didn't always look for mentors. I was extremely shy. Like, I was
Yeah, I can relate
extremely
to that for
shy.
sure.
Yeah, I had a hard time reaching out to people, so I had to learn how to do that outreach. So, so it sounds like you're kind of an enabler. You're somebody who likes to enable people. You like to organize things. So there's kind of a few different like types of roles that you can fill within an organization. So, and it depends on kind of where you want to go into the organization, like how that does. So you have kind of a few different groups that deal with this type of work depending on the company, and it can be set up differently. So I'm going to just talk about some job families that might apply for you, and then we can talk about like what sounds interesting from that. So the first thing is um, um, the kind of administrative functions of the business. These are things like most people know finance, human resources, but also as part of that, there's often some type of business operations function in the company, and that group is really where you're going to see the operations managers. So, what operations management does is they are kind of responsible for making sure all the systems and processes within a company are all synchronized in a way that enable people to get the work done and achieve objectives. So that's kind of the operations. In operations, they kind of link between strategy, like what are our goals, and then what do people need in order to accomplish those goals. In these types of roles, it's really important to have relationships with people because people, if they trust you, will tell you things that they're not just going to tell anybody else. And
Mhm.
they'll let you do things like get in and watch what they're actually doing and watch them make mistakes and things like that. So you can really see how processes are actually working. Because oftentimes, what people say they're doing or what they say is happening versus what is they're actually doing or is actually happening is different, not like in a malicious way. It just has to do with how our brains remember information. And so,
Mhm.
like, people remember the big things and there's emotional attachments and blah, 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 all this stuff to it. And so, kind of in operations management, your role is to understand ground truth so that you can put new processes, add resources, change resources, perhaps even restructure teams to make things work more smoothly. So that's really more of an internal role within a company. It doesn't really face clients. It usually doesn't touch product, but it has a lot of awareness of of everything that's going on in the company. So one of the things I saw in your career planning workbook was that you are really interested in gaining business acumen.
Mhm.
That's like a playground for understanding how businesses work. Like you're going to understand every aspect of a business that way. So that's one kind of route that's in that kind of project management type role. Then you have the project management job family. These are related. So if you think of like concentric, if you think of like a Venn diagram, there is some overlap in skills. So typically,
Mhm.
like because of the crossover in skills, you might see people move between these two verticals. Like I started in project management and then moved to operations management and then moved to strategy. That's more of like a lateral or diagonal type of move. Then you've got people who just stay in the project management vein or just stay in the operations vein, those types of things too. But that's kind of your range of motion when you're in an operational role, is that you can move into these other types of roles. On the project management side, the project management side is really about kind of a similar thing, but on a smaller scale. So you're focused on a specific project within the business. That project has specific goals, specific outcomes that it's looking to achieve. And so your role as a project manager is to plan out the project, make sure it's resourced appropriately, make sure you're managing risks, managing stakeholders that's one of the biggest things about a project management role is the stakeholder management. Because as most project managers will tell you, once you create a plan, you can almost throw that plan out the window because something inevitably is going to go differently than expected. But the idea behind the planning is that you've already planned for different kind of scenarios, and so you don't have to spend time problem solving and things like that. But you have somebody just kind of looking over everything, making sure all the moving parts to get that body of work or get that deliverable done are working together, and moving forward accordingly. So you've got that kind of function, the project management function that is more at kind of like, so if you think about operations management is like the 50,000 foot kind of view, and they're kind of sitting like looking over the whole business. Then you've got project managers who are like small little pieces of the business. And then you might have like departmental management. So I see that you're looking at biotech and health tech. Oftentimes you might see things like clinical operations in there, which that's almost like an operational role that sits over just the clinical side of the business. So it's almost like a departmental operations, and making sure that all of the clinical functions of the business are working properly. So that's where you might see clinical trial managers sit, is in that um, particular hierarchy. And then I also see that you're interested in health tech. So health tech, when you started to get into the technology space, there's a few additional roles that you might think about. So there's a role called a business analyst role. Business analysts are responsible for kind of taking the requirements that like a product team comes out with. So they say, here's what the customer's needs are, and we need to build this functionality. A business analyst is going to take that and analyze it and say, okay, how do we implement this in a scalable way for the technology team? And they're going to do the translation between those two teams. So in that respect, you kind of have to have a knowledge of like technology architecture and things like that, and product and product design. So that's another role that you can look at. And then there's the technical project manager role. So within project management, there are different types of verticals. So you have what's called waterfall project management, which is very traditional. It's like the sequential, everything happens in this order, and then you get an end state. Those types of project managers generally preside over projects that there's a known objective, and the deliverables can be reasonably known ahead of time. And then in the technology world, there's a different flavor of project management called agile project management. Sometimes you might see things like Scrum or Scrum Master or things like that. And that's really more an iterative style of project management where, overall, like the kind of rough sketch of what you want to accomplish, but there's no real way to know how to accomplish it until you start doing it. So the first thing you're going to do is say like, okay, what does our foundation need to look like? What does our minimally viable product need to look like? And then from there, building on top of that. So it's more of an iterative type of project management. They're called sprints. Usually they happen in cycles of like 1 or 2 weeks. And so what the project manager in that vein is doing is really what's called sprint planning. And you're doing things like burn down charts. There's some calculations around like resource management and things like that you do. So different styles of project management, different types of needs. So I just dumped a whole lot on you. Was there anything in what I said that stood out to you as something that kind of piqued your interest?
I think I would most enjoy the project management roles. I don't know which of the types I might like better, but yeah, I think I would maybe be more interested in that over some of the other
Yeah.
like ones you mentioned.
Yeah, and it's definitely something to explore. The good news is when you go into a career in industry, like you haven't signed the contract in blood. In the US and industry, uh, there's something called at-will employment, which basically means they can fire you or let you go at any time, but it also means that you can leave at any time. In some of the other countries, so for some of the other folks on the call, that's not always the case. You're kind of locked into contracts and you have notice periods and things like that. But in the US, you have some flexibility. So if you get into a job and you don't like it, and you know on day one that you don't like it, you could quit the same day and nobody's going to hold it against you. That's just how it works, right? So, so the good news is you can get in and test these things out and kind of just pick a starting point. Like, okay, I'm going to test out this. One of the things that I actually recommend is that you look for jobs where there's a demand, where you might have some subject matter expertise. So you're kind of on the molecular and nutrition side. So maybe you want to look at biotech or health tech companies that are focused on something with like gut microbiome or something in you're using iron in the brain, right? So something that has to do with brain science and things like that. So you may want to kind of find a company that is building something in that area so that you because you have strong subject matter expertise there, which means you have strong knowledge and you have some project management expertise because that's a way to wedge in. And once you wedge in, that gives you opportunity to explore. So that's the big thing. The other thing that I would say, and I don't say this for all professions, but if you're going to be pursuing any kind of project management role, it's always good to have a project management certification. And there are kind of two routes that you can go. There's the PMP, which is Project Management Professional. It's from an organization called the Project Management Institute. Most PhDs, because of your career history and the work that you've done on projects, can qualify almost right out of the gate to go and complete the exam. It does take some studying and whatever, but I've seen people get it in as few as 6 weeks. You'll have to go and gather some documentation about projects that you've managed in the past, and you'll have to get sign off from certain people on those. But that can be a fairly quick route. The good news about that is there's a portion of the exam that is about waterfall project management, so traditional, and there's a portion of the exam that's about agile. So that's a good starting point for you to start to explore, like, what are the types of things that people do in each type of these roles, and what are the tools and techniques that I like, right? I like using. So for me, I'm a big fan of network diagrams. Most people hate them. I absolutely love them. It just my little organizational heart I love the structure and puzzling through it and all of that stuff. Other people absolutely hate it. But that was a pretty clear indicator for me that waterfall is my jam. So that's a good place for you to start there. What questions do you have about any of that?
Is there other certifications besides the PMP?
Yeah, so there's certain agile certifications that you can pursue. So there's a Scrum Master certification that you can pursue. That one, there's a lot of different organizations that you can go through. There's one called the Scrum Alliance that is a pretty good one. So if you just want to go towards Agile first, that's a good place to start. And then there's another certification. It's an Agile one. Hold on, I'm just going to look it up here. Because I want to say it's Fast Agile or something like that. Safe Agile. It's capital S, capital A, capital F, lowercase e. That's another one. So for the Agile certifications, you can look for Scrum, or you can look for Safe Agile. The known providers there that people are going to recognize are like Scrum Alliance and PMI.
Okay. My other question is like, how early do you think someone can start applying for project manager type of jobs? I'm supposed
What
to
do you mean?
finish in May, and I don't know if I can apply to jobs now or I should be waiting till closer to when I'll be available.
You can absolutely start applying now. So what we see in our program is if you're
Mm-hmm.
following kind of a similar strategy to what we follow in our program, which is applying plus doing hiring manager outreach, there's a whole process associated with that. It takes 2 to 3 weeks to build momentum. And then once you've built that momentum and start interviewing, interview cycles are taking between 4 and 8 weeks. So you're looking at
Okay.
about 3 months out before you even get an offer, and then
Mhm.
asking for an additional month to finish out your PhD um, is not unreasonable. Most companies, if you say, "Hey, I've got 30 days before I can start," are going to be totally fine with that.
Okay.
So I usually recommend to people that you start applying for jobs at least 6 months out from when you plan to start in a market like we have today. Particularly if you're doing your job search solo without any support or coaching, like you
Hmm.
want to start sooner rather than later, because it just kind of helps you manage risk and it gives you more optionality. So you're not waiting till the end and then suddenly you're in a cycle of like, I have to
Hmm.
get something so quick, so I have to
Yeah.
accept anything, right?
Uh, yeah.
So, what other questions do you have?
Um, oh no. Um, you know what the pay is like for some of these different, does the
Yeah.
pay differ if you're waterfall versus agile or technical versus
No, it's more dependent on the type of company, the type of project management, because even within each of those styles, there's different like scopes of your responsibility. So depending on the company, it can be anywhere like a very entry level project manager, you're looking at around 60 or 65,000, up to a more senior project manager, you're looking, 110 to 120,000.
okay.
And when you have certifications like a PMP, that's going to put you closer to the 100,000 range because part of the PMP, why it's so accepted like it is because part of the application process is I want to say you have to prove that you have like 3,000 hours of 2 or 3,000 hours of project management experience. I might be like misremembering that number, so don't quote me on it. But they verify that you've had a
Okay.
certain number of hours of managing projects, which your PhD should get you there. You should have no problem getting there with your PhD research.
Okay. Oh.
So, what other questions?
Um, oh, I think that might be it.
Okay. All right. So hopefully I've given you a few things to think about, Cameron. So what I would
Yeah,
typically advise
definitely.
is kind of you take this from here and then you want to go out and just research some of these things. Take a look at the PMP. Look at some of the resources that PMI and Scrum Alliance have available on these things. Go to the different types of companies in biotech and healthcare that are interesting to you. Look at what they do. Go to their LinkedIn page, look at other project management managers with the company. And the great thing about LinkedIn is you can see their background, right? So you can go and you can
Hmm.
kind of say, like, what's their background? Good news about project management is usually nobody, when they're a kid goes, you know what I want to be when I grow up? I want to be a project manager. So a lot of people have just kind of fallen into that role. in different ways. There's a lot of kind of diversity in how people make their way into project management. But you can kind of start to get a sense for for different types of company, what does the background look like? So what types of companies might I be more competitive at?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, all right. So with that, Cameron, thank you so much for kind of, again, being a hand raiser in the scenario. You've got our email. If you have any other questions as you go into your research stuff, just reach out, let us know. Happy to answer those. And with that, we'll open up the floor to questions. So anyone on the call, if you have questions, please go ahead and just put those in the chat.
Or is it just fine to ask them straight out?
Yeah, it's also fine to ask them straight out.
Okay. So previously to my PhD, which I'm currently doing, I worked in industry already and was acting as project manager. So I found that topic which we're talking about today quite aligning, which is nice. Just questioning on that side of the PMI, which you mentioned, would it make sense to potentially reach out to those companies to get those hours certified so that I can use them towards that certifications? Or
yes, absolutely. And PMI actually will give you a structure for doing that. So if you're going to go towards the certification, they and it's been a while since I've been in there. I got mine I want to say 7 or 8 years ago when we were still doing paper, and I believe they've moved to a digital way of submitting your experience. But go to their website, look at their application process. It's just pmi.org. You can see their application process. You can see what's required and how they want you to submit all of those things.
okay, well, thanks for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I see some other questions in the chat. So if you need so much proven experience for a PMP, is it then a more acknowledged certification than a Scrum Master? Because that goes quite fast, as I understand. Yes, the great thing about the PMP is because it's a global certification and because they've been around for so long, they're very well regarded. PMI is very well regarded across the globe. And so because of that proven experience, it is a much more acknowledged certification than many out there. So, I highly recommend the PMP if you're going into one of these types of roles. If you're not, it's a lot of effort in the application and the testing requirements and then the ongoing professional development that you have to do to keep it up. So if you're not going into a project management profession, I don't recommend it. But if you are, the PMI certification is one of the best out there in terms of recognition and credibility because of that. It's almost like I have a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. The requirements in the PMP were almost as rigorous as what was required for me to get licensure if I had pursued that route. So it's a really strong professional certification. And then we have another question. I'm a PhD in medical anthropology and trying to land a product manager position in healthcare pharmaceutical companies. Is it possible to start out on mid-level roles, and have you seen such cases before? Absolutely, especially if you're a PhD. Product manager roles are actually an entirely separate job family from project manager roles. There again, in that Venn diagram, there's some overlap with some of the transferable skills between those two professions, but it's a totally different job family. So the types of things that you need to be able to do as a product manager are things like customer needs assessment, market valuations, market assessment. You need to be able to do, create business cases for different things. You need to have a good understanding of things like, total addressable market. So TAM, SAM, SOM, those are some different things that you'll hear come up. Total addressable market, service addressable market, service obtainable market. So you need to kind of be able to do market sizing and value assessment and all of that. You also need to be able to develop specifications and objectives for then your R&D teams to go through and develop those things or research those things. You need to be able to understand things about the different product life cycles. All products and services go through a natural life cycle. Depending on the type of product and service, that life cycle could look very, very different. So you need to understand some things about that. Again, yes, it is possible to go in at a mid-level, but you need to be able to explain your PhD experience in terms of identifying a problem, doing the R&D around that problem to identify a solution. So it's called problem solution fit. So identifying a solution that kind of matches between your problem and your solution, and also how you go about commercializing that solution. So then that's where the business casing and things come into that, because you've got to be able to influence people. So that's that's what you want to think about if you want to go into a product manager role. Given that you're in anthropology, I imagine you have a lot of that skills, but it's just about kind of positioning it in those commercial terms that product teams are going to understand. Yeah, so there's a question about PhD holders can qualify for the PMP by getting their project work verified. Could you explain how that process typically works? Also, have you personally gone through the PMP certification, and what was it like for you? Yes. So part of my experience and part of what people hire me for is to actually stand up project management teams within their organization. So I personally have my PMP certification. I've trained project managers. I have guided them through their PMP certifications. So generally what the process looks like is you have to go and you have to gather information about how you completed certain activities, how many hours you have towards certain activities within it's called the PMBOK standard, PMBOK, Project Management Body of Knowledge Standard. And you'll go through and you'll classify your hours into different categories of project management. Once you've done that, you'll have past supervisors sign off on those hours saying, yes, you've done it. Once you've submitted that and they've validated that you have enough hours, they'll send you an invitation to complete the PMP exam. You'll sit for the PMP exam. It's a multiple choice test, but it's very much about applied knowledge. So they're going to ask you, within the test, what you'll see is there's good, better, best answers in these multiple choices, and you're looking for best answers. So that kind of can make that test a little more rigorous than a lot of certification tests. Once you take the test, you'll immediately be informed whether you passed or not. If you passed, you're good to go, and then you have to complete a certain number of professional development units every 3 years to keep your certification current. For me, it was a really great experience. I really enjoyed it. The hardest thing is the getting all of the terminology down, because they use a lot of technical terminology related to project management. And so you have to really have a good understanding of that technical terminology. So going into the exam, it requires a lot of study. Once you come out and actually become a practitioner, most people don't use all that technical terminology, but the test does. So you have to really know it. There is another question. In this tough job market, does a long period of unemployment after a PhD significantly hurt your chances of breaking into the industry, and how long is considered too long? No, everybody, since about 2007, when we had the financial crisis in the US that then became global financial crisis, it's just recognized that people are going to have gaps on their resume. So it's not a bad thing. The way that I typically tell people to explain the gap is to just say that you took some time off to really understand and determine your next steps, because that looks responsible, right? Like, I took some time to understand what I really want to do, and what I really want to do is this. Therefore, I'm a lower hiring risk. Next question. I'm a PhD in immunology with experience working with infectious diseases in low-income countries. Are there any specific courses or qualifications to land project management roles for public health or research projects? So that PMP certification spans across industries. So that's same advice there. And then we've got a question about what is the best strategy to obtain industry work, considering such a tight job market, tariffs, and companies generally slowing down hiring. There's kind of a two-pronged approach to this. So the first is making sure that you've got your positioning really tight. One of the biggest traps that we see PhDs fall into is that they apply for everything. It's like kind of like a scattershot approach to getting the job search. And the idea is like, more applications, more roles equals more opportunity, but it's kind of a fallacy. What we've seen work better is actually deciding on one role, or if there's not enough demand for that one role, then one job family. So like the operations job family or the project management job family, really focusing in on that, creating really tight positioning in your resume and cover letter about that specific type of position, and then spending all of your time focusing on applying for positions that meet that particular profile of job. And then pairing that with outreach to hiring decision makers at those companies to increase your visibility. So to give you an example, recently one of the folks who were helping him with his job search in our job search program, he applied, he got a rejection, an automated rejection letter from the system. He had been having a side conversation with one of the hiring decision makers. And about 3 minutes after the rejection email came through, the recruiter came back to him asking him or inviting him to an interview. So we know that really works. That's not the only time we've seen that. We see that actually pretty often. And the reason for that is that recruiters, who are the first ones to review your application, they go through that applicant tracking system. They're going off a list of criteria, and they often don't have a lot of technical skill. The hiring managers have the technical skill, and they are better able to flex their discretion on who they bring in for interviews and not. And then there is a question about, are these project management certificates good for people who applied from Morocco? Are the certificates coming from Coursera on PMI or PMP good for searching jobs, even if I have a scientific background? PMP is a global organization. It's globally recognized. One thing I forgot to mention in the process is, in advance of going to sit for your exam, you have to complete 40 hours of coursework in project management. You just want to look for PMI approved providers. Some of them are on Coursera, some of them are on sites like Udemy. That's where I did mine. And so you can use those, but they are not the certifying body. So just going on Coursera and getting a project management certificate is not the same as getting certified by PMI. Those are not the same thing. So what you want to do is you want to make sure you go to pmi.org and you can look at the requirements and follow their process. And that PMP certification, you can only get it through PMI. There's no other place where you can get that certification. There's another question about how to best position yourself as a doctoral researcher 6 months before the defense for jobs that require a completed degree. Is the best foot just writing expected completion date in the CV and or cover letter? In your education section, all you would do is you would put PhD candidate, and then in parentheses, just expected in the month and year you're expecting to get it in. You don't have to note it anywhere else. So you don't want to draw a bunch of attention to that. You don't have to note it anywhere else except in the education section. I see one of the other traps that I see a lot of PhDs fall into is they're looking to give a high level of precision about what they do and they don't have. And make no mistake, the job search process is a sales process. And so nowhere in any type of sales are you going to say are you going to hear a salesperson go in and say like, hey, we're really I have these skills, and then focus on everything they don't have. So you want to apply a minimal level of focus to what you don't have, and most of the focus of your positioning around what you do have. And then we'll take a couple more questions and then we'll wrap up. So there's a question, how do you market yourself for more management roles if your PhD has been mainly lab work in such a niche area? When positioning yourself for management level roles, you do have to have some type of team management. So whether that's managing a project team of junior resources or something like that, that's what people are going to be looking for. So you want to be talking about things like managed a team of 2 to 3 junior scientists, or managed a team of 2 to 3 early career scientists, or mentored X number of researchers to learn X, Y, and Z techniques. You can talk about what those researchers went on to do. So maybe they got accepted into other programs or they got jobs doing certain things. You want to talk about their progression. So that's one of the things you can do as a PhD to kind of integrate that. And then there's a question for fresh PhDs applying to scientist roles. Job descriptions often mention 1 to 2 years of industry experience. Since it's generally recommended to apply even if you meet only 60 to 70% of the requirements, I was wondering whether those 1 to 2 years of experience fall into the remaining 30% that candidates may lack. If I don't have any industry experience, would it make sense still to apply? For everyone on this call, whenever you see the words industry experience, I want you to replace industry with applied experience. That's what that's code for. They want to know that you have hands-on experience doing the types of work that they do in their daily environment. So think about that as applied experience. That's why they put that. They don't want people who, in that scenario, they don't want people coming fresh out of a bachelor's degree who don't have any hands-on experience in the lab. That's what they're trying to protect against there. So that's that. And then secondly, skill endorsements on LinkedIn. I've never really used those as a hiring manager. I'm sure there are some people out there who use them, but I just don't find them that useful in terms of telling you what people's skills actually are. Now, recruiters may use them when they're doing searches for candidates and stuff like that, because that's available in the back end LinkedIn talent solution that LinkedIn has. But as a hiring manager, I generally don't have access to that, so I'm not really looking at that. I'm looking how if you can come in and you can speak credibly and show judgment and give examples of specific things that you've done in your work, problems that you've run into, how you've solved them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's kind of what I'm looking for. So with that, we're right at time. I want to thank everybody for coming and kind of all the great questions that were asked. Again, thank you to Cameron for being a good sport and letting us do some live coaching with him in front of an audience. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Elena to wrap us up. if we still have Elena.
Here, sorry, I was doing some other stuff actually in the background. Apologies. Anyhow, I just want to say thank you to everyone who attended. I don't know if this was the first AlmaMe session that you attended. I realized we didn't introduce ourselves at all in the beginning, but anyhow, so you will get an email from me after this in like 4 hours or so with the replays. If you want to rewatch this, you can do this on our YouTube channel. If you haven't checked out our YouTube channel, please, when you get the email, check it out. And if you like it, give it a follow. We're just starting it, kind of. So there's not so much on it, but there is some stuff on it. And if anyone is interested in more support in terms of making that transition from academia into industry, we do have our Job Accelerator program, which I will just put a link into the email too. So if you want to check that out on how we help, we generally work with we have worked with STEM PhDs in economy, psychology, so social sciences. So yeah, and we have helped, I think, across the board, like theoretical mathematicians get jobs. So we have worked with PhD students, postdocs, tenure professors. So yeah, if anyone feels they need some more support, guidance, and just doesn't want to do it alone, yeah, we're here. So you will get some more information on that end too. And with this, I just want to say thank you so much. We're gonna have more of these sessions coming. The next one will be a CV review session, which is on the 4th of February. It will be a live one too. Yeah, I may actually send out an email if someone would be interested in volunteering for this, or I will make a LinkedIn post where people can volunteer. I haven't decided, but stay tuned for the next session. And yeah, with this, I just want to say thank you, Angela. Thank you, Cameron, for volunteering here today. And yeah, I hope this was valuable and see you next time.
Great. Take care, everyone.